Raphael, had to go back to the Buddhist Hindu text to get "you are God" in the correct way. Most of these people are going back to Aleister Crowley or Theosophy by Blavatsky, which are
Right.
social engineering.
Right. Yes. Sorry, not to sorry, continue. Yes.
Exactly, right? And that's what I believe Dark Journalist shows us. The social engineering is in the X series, whether that was his intention or not. And
Yes.
we can look at Theosophy and see that they had somnambulists, which were about 9-year-old little girls that they would put into trance and send into the astral realm to spy on other people. And that is child abuse. That is psychic rape. And I'm coming from the Persephone perspective of maidens. You don't do that to little girls. You know, it's like, it's an abomination to the soul. And for Theosophy to be looked at in a positive light, even knowing that they're socially engineering and that they're doing psychic rape to children, it just shows you they are part of the New World Order. In fact, we wouldn't have the school system we have now without Theosophy and Alice Bailey. So these kinds of New World Order conspiracies are what the New Agers need to be looking at and getting serious about.
Karma's gonna get you, gonna knock you right on the head. You better get yourself together, pretty soon you're gonna be dead. Karma police, arrest this man, toxin mouth. It buzzes like a fridge, is like a
Welcome to Team Rabbit Hole Edition 161, Occult Priestess with Corinne Wilson. Whether it's Greek mythology, Buddha, or Synchro-Mystic Kate Bush, this LA Aquarian YouTuber has been down lots of rabbit holes and comes out the other side of the looking glass. Well met, Occult Priestess.
Hey, Corinne.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
I'm definitely happy to have you here. I do feel bad now that I realized you thought it was a video callers thing, so you were all dressed up and stuff for this. So my bad in not explicitly making it clear, but plus 10 points for Gryffindor for dressing up and doing your part, so that won't, the karma will be noticed by the gods or whatever.
Of course. It's amazing, my shirt that I wore today, what you just said, because it says books turn muggles into wizards.
But of course. Bada bing. And I know there'll be a lot of synchronicities. We'll get into that in a second. Just do make sure you hit mute. Perfect. So today's episode is 161. We're really trucking through them now. And that would be 8 numerologically reduced. So that would be the strength card in the tarot.
Strength is, to me, like the taming of the lion of the ego. So we see in the traditional tarot that we have a blonde woman who is taming this lion. And I think that that's a great representation of the ego.
Well, I guess I should just say how I turned on to you originally. I'm pretty sure it was through the Sync book, but that's kind of how I became aware of you. I know that you're a YouTuber. We've had some conversations. In fact, you turned me on to the Little Buddha Keanu Reeves movie where there's a kid actor in there who disturbingly reminds me of myself as my childhood.
Definitely. I love the Sync stuff.
Perfect, yeah. And you were always, not always, but you were going down certain rabbit holes with Kate Bush, whom I'm not personally very much aware of, but you were making very succinct kind of evidences of the Tao howling, if you want to put it that way. So it seemed really interesting. So, Corinne, maybe a good place to start. Where are you coming from? Where did you grow up? What were kind of the belief systems that were given to you? I know you've been kind of a witchy or gothic chick from an earlier age, it seemed. Kind of sticking true to, when you just said the blonde chick holding the lion's mouth, I was going to say, well, brunettes could do it too. Like, you're evidence of this. So kind of give me an idea of where you grew up, how you got to LA, what you're doing, how you got to where you are, as long or as much or as little as you want to speak about that.
Okay, strap in, kids. Get your Illuminati tea. Here we go. When I was born, I was raised a Jehovah's Witness, so that was my childhood religion. And I grew up in an abusive household where I was battered physically by brother, sister, and stepfather. My stepfather was a Vietnam vet, and I think that he was a demon basically because he was not right in the head. And my mother was a beautiful, sweet, codependent blonde. And she really reminded me of, like, she was like my goddess, like my Marilyn Monroe, my mother. And she and I both had sleep paralysis, which is, well, it's basically like a bloodline haunting, which we can get into later. But let's just say I've been multidimensional since I was born, and of course before that. But I always was aware of my multidimensionality because in sleep paralysis, you actually go to another realm. So I was taken to another realm every night. So that's a really bad childhood, actually. It really sucked. It was very hard. And then I became a teenager, and that's when I went to the Rocky Horror Picture Show, and I met a person who was a predator. And that predator soon had me as a virgin in his bed. And that's how that happened to me. And it's very similar to the story of my goddess, Persephone, who was stolen. This is the Greek. She was stolen by Hades and taken to the underworld. And that mirrored sleep paralysis, but that also mirrored this person that was in my life being a predator on my virginity, basically. And that lasted like 3 or 4 years. So I found out through this tumultuous, horrifying relationship that was non-monogamous, not on my part, but on his, that I was codependent, just like my mother. But that person was also Wiccan and gave me my first books or instruction on what Wicca, was to him, which wasn't at all what it ended up being to me. But around 15, 16 is when I first got the whiff of Wicca. And being a Jehovah's Witness, I was like, well, this is all evil. Of course, there's no question this is evil. But then we fast forward a few more years, and I'm staying at a friend's house in their basement, and there's a box of books. And the book that I dug out was The Complete Book of Witchcraft by Raymond Buckland. And that's where my journey really started, where I read my own book, and I wasn't taking it for hearsay, what Wicca was or what spirituality was or what paganism was. And then from there, I worked at a nightclub, my dance club, basically, like a regular Gothic nightclub for about 5 years as a tarot reader. And I was counseling my peers. And so I was learning myself as Wiccan to meditate, to talk to the gods, to refine my character, to know myself, know thyself. And in that, I was gifted with being able to know others and see their psychology and where they were coming from and what their childhood was like, and to be able to compare everybody to everybody else. So it's almost as if I was working in a psych ward. You could say that. Because I was working with so many people.
Aren't we all?
Indeed,
Certainly.
sir. We're all mad here, Raphael. And so after that, that's when I first got my first occult shop. And we owned it. My husband at the time.
Was this in LA or is this in the Midwest?
This is in Cincinnati, Ohio. All of this took place in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Cutting edge Cincinnati.
Okay, so the occult shop is where I first started my first coven, or my only coven, coven of the illuminated shadow. And at some point we had like 30 people. It got really big. And I started the first occult store website in the area. I was really on the internet. I had a shopping cart where you could go buy stuff, and we even helped out people in prison and jail to get things that they needed for worship. So very much a community oriented situation. It was called The Occult Shop in Price Hill. I wasn't into money. I was never into money. My mom, the lessons I learned from my mother was a workaholic, which means she used work to ignore her own feelings. And as a little girl, I knew that, and it made me mad. And so I still have some issues with that greed, selfish money stuff. I like have none of that in my body. I don't even know how to do that. So I just want to explain that a little bit. I was really into it for community and not for manipulating people towards my own goals or means. I really want enlightenment for everyone. It was the same then as it is now. And so I was in that store for about, I don't know, a while, a long time, too long. And then the community just basically, 9/11 happened, and the financial stuff happened, and we could no longer carry on. You know, it's like we were shut down through tragedy, indeed. And also, the community was extremely toxic by then. I hadn't fully been through recovery. I hadn't fully healed myself from codependency yet. I was still acting out of childhood issues, and I felt ganged up on by the entire community. I started a witches' ball. We did this big dance in this big like mansion for several years, you know, this big witches' ball. It was great. It was really probably what I wanted more than a store. Was a place for people just to come enjoy each other, you know, and spirituality in general. So at
Cue Ballroom Blitz. It sounds like that had a bigger impact on me than I might realize.
Totally, dude. It was amazing. I have so many pictures. But then at age 30, this is the big deal. This is what really happened to me. So, you know, you see all of that paranormal stuff happen to me all my life. But when I hit age 30, the sky opened up and God started talking to me. We call it a Kundalini awakening. But my ego died, literally, and I was let into heaven. But through this, also, I had visions and experiences that went on for weeks at a time where I was not fully human. I was a being instead of a human being. And that caused much worry among my friends and family. And that much worry Nazi'd me all the way into the psych ward. And so I took many years where I would go through a Kundalini awakening. I would get all this gnosis, have all of this understanding of the universe and my place in it and what was coming next, even like Fukushima before it happened, put me in the psych ward because of all of I was so connected to the earth and everything, and I understood what was happening. I even did a warning video about it. And then more recently, fast forward, I did a warning video about 2020 as well. I only have 2 warning videos as a psychic, and that's Fukushima and obviously 2020. So I want you to know that I've become an astral astronaut, a journeyman, if you will, and I've seen the visions of the saints, if you will. And it's a really hard life to be a visionary in this culture where you are not supported. And in fact, you're told that you're probably lying and you just want money. So I'll let you go from there.
Well, that's never fun. You are an Aquarius, so I do find it not terribly shocking that you're, you know, cutting edge, spiritually rebellious. Oh, go ahead, Raffael.
To mention a particular idea, basically because I believe I saw something by Colin Smith. Maybe you've heard of him from Lifting the Veil, and he's also kind of been frustrated, understandably.
Yes, Colin, I agree. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, definitely, yes. Being frustrated about kind of being shadow banned and, you know, strange things happening, and, you know, all this division everywhere goes with, like, you know, visionary abilities, or even just, as you mentioned, and thank you for, you know, kind of explaining this, what you're in it for. Because what I find too often times, both in terms of actual understanding and also in terms of motive, individuals are very, very quick to assume the level of understanding and depth someone has who may be, you know, having a shop like you did, or sharing information, or channeling, or being a psychic. So number one, they easily attribute usually lack of understanding without, in my view, really getting into any particular information or channel themselves. And then number two, of course, they're also too often quick to assume motive. and then be like, oh, you're doing this, yeah, but definitely you just want to manipulate someone. I'm like, of course this can happen. These cases obviously do exist, but to kind of pre-label someone, is a little bit short-sighted, I would say. But on a reassurance, let's say, to those that would find themselves through whatever internal drive to be the leading threshold or the bleeding edge, I would like to read just 4 paragraphs from Vasily Kandinsky about the spiritual and art, chapter 2, The Movement of the Triangle. Kandinsky was apparently an anthroposophist, which also Dark Journalist talked a lot about. We may also get into that a bit later. As we understand through Rudolf Steiner, he basically said in 1916, in 100 years, we're going to have another chance. And obviously they didn't kind of manage to fend off overly analyzed materialism and scientism back then. So maybe now's another chance. So that's why I'm going to read this excerpt. So here it says, the movement of the triangle. The life of the spirit may be fairly represented in diagram as a large acute angled triangle divided horizontally into unequal parts with the narrowest segment uppermost. The lower the segment, the greater it is in breadth, depth, and area. The whole triangle is moving slowly, almost invisibly forwards and upwards. Where the apex was today, the second segment is tomorrow. What today can be understood only by the apex and to the rest of the triangle is an incomprehensible gibberish, forms tomorrow the true thought and feeling of the second segment. At the apex of the top segment stands often one man or woman or being or entity, allow me to say, and only one. His joyful vision cloaks a vast sorrow. Even those who are nearest to him in sympathy do not understand him. Angrily they abuse him as charlatan or madman. So in his life stood Beethoven, solitary and insulted. In every segment of the triangle are artists. Each one of them who can see beyond the limits of his segment is a prophet to those about him, and helps the advance of the obstinate whole. But those who are blind, or those who retard the movement of the triangle for baser reasons, are fully understood by their fellows and acclaimed for their genius. The greater the segment, which is the same as saying the lower it lies in the triangle, so the greater the number who understand the words of the artist. Every segment hungers consciously, or much more often unconsciously, for their corresponding spiritual food. This food is offered by the artists, and for this food, the segment immediately below will tomorrow be stretching out eager hands.
Word.
Thank you, Raphael. I gotta say this because I'm a visual, and if I forget, I'll forget. So the Eye of Providence is what he first did. He did the horizontal line, and he said, "This is the Eye of Providence. This is the top of the pyramid." Would you agree?
Could certainly be seen in this way. The way I understand, well, in a sense, well, if we would just say it's just a triangle, and you make the very first segment on top, and just one line at first, it could kind of be seen as the Eye of Providence on top.
Because
sure.
Providence, it sounds like he was speaking of Providence. It's not usually respected. It's not usually dealt with in a good way here on this plane. It is almost as if he was describing Providence's issue, because some of us talk to Providence, which the audience might not know. You can look it up on Wikipedia. Just look up Providence, but that is the eye in the triangle that we use in symbology. And then how he says it's the artists that bring us the food. Really, it's the artist that connects with heaven to bring us the food down to earth. That's the connection of what you call artist, right?
The ambrosia of the gods.
Right. Totally.
Yeah. And so I would like to read a very short poem, I suppose, from Hermes, my spirit guide. And this is called The Lament of Hermes Thrice Great. And he wrote this before the Christian era. And it says, it's a warning, by the way. So he says,
"What is this place?"
"Here you enter the coils of the dragon. Here my power was born. Here all things are possible, and all things meet their opposites."
Darkness will be preferred to light. Death will be thought more profitable than life. No one will raise his eyes to heaven. The pious deemed insane, and the impious wise. The madman thought brave, the wicked esteemed as good. And as to the soul and the belief that it is immortal, or that you may attain to immortality, as I have taught you, all this they will mock, persuade themselves that it is false. No word of reverence or piety, no utterance worthy of heaven and of the gods of heaven will be heard or believed. The Lament of Hermes Thrice Great.
Look into the eyes of the dragon and despair. I destroy you. I consign you to oblivion.
Well, as a double Gemini, I obviously have no issue with Mercury being quoted. And Mercury just went into Scorpio. Mercury, I know, is not Hermes exactly, and Trismegistus, totally different kind of situation, but all kind of in the same pool of thought. So,
Better me with your questions. You haven't told no lies. You'll always ask what it's all about. Don't listen to my replies. Singly laughs don't mean you can ask us. Pushing down the relative, bringing out your high self. Think of the fun song. Pushing down the better view instead of bringing the attitudes to walk the world. And everything you ask to brace yourself. You grace the beast. I know this world and what it seems. It's unbelievable. You better me with your questions. You haven't told no lies. You'll always ask what it's all about. Don't listen to my replies.
this might bring up the first kind of question I have, and I haven't written
Can
anything
we
down,
talk
so-
about Mercury / Hermes
Yeah.
real quick? Oh, great.
Yeah, well,
So-
I want to compare that and see how it integrates with your Buddhist thinking. But go
Just
for it.
recently, someone explained to us, I think it was Andreas probably, like a hashtag actually is the sign of Hermes or Mercury itself. And this is hashtag Team Rabbit Hole, so we can always talk about Hermes, so please. Occult Priestess.
Excellent. Now, Hermes is well known among Masons, but I want you to know that I met Hermes on my own in meditation and then came to realize and to understand that he's always been with me even before I was a person. So it's a beautiful, sacred thing. So Gemini, right? Gemini's ruled by Mercury. And Mercury in numerology is number 5, the communicator. And we know in history that the Greek is pre-Roman, came before the Romans. And there's many memes out there that I love to collect about the Romans stealing all the Greek gods and then, giving us this new planetary system. We don't have the original anymore because it's all been Romanized. And so you can say that Mercury is real. Now he is, but he's just an offshoot of the actual Hermes. I hope that makes sense.
It does, and I've definitely seen the memes you're talking about, where it's like an image and then someone like shoddily drawing a version. It's like
Totally
Greek to
makes
Rome.
sense. And since you bring this up, I just want to ask, in generic, let's say, if you're all familiar with all the Tartaria and reset research, let's say.
Can you define the word Tartaria?
Oh yeah, gladly. So basically what it's about is, maybe to put in the most simple way, there's a map by Marcus Ortelius, I believe is his name, the Orbis Terrarum, which is like this old map projection. We know there's all kinds of different old maps that are interesting. However, on here, in the area we would now understand as the Russian Federation, there's an area labeled Tartaria, and there's also books up to, let's say, about 1800, which is kind of like an atlas basically, and is showing the states and or the flags of, sovereign states, or however you would call it. And aside from things like the Duchy of Muscovy and so on, which is kind of interesting, there is also Tartaria. And the whole idea just being that, just as you mentioned with the Romanization, you may have heard of Antonin, I guess, he's a Russian, Fomenko, about the 300 missing years. And then some people suggesting that the one in historical dates actually oftentimes was a J originally. So there may be another 1,000 years that have kind of been squeezed in, and just a general idea also with the mud flooding and the strange buildings that we may have been reset in terms of civilization and knowledge quite a few times, and potentially also quite recently and quite more drastically than we assume. And why I bring this up is just because it may also bring many of the positive ideas we associate with Atlantis or Lemuria in terms of technology or spiritual understanding and so on, may not be as far back as we are led to assume, as including, if one likes that story, the idea of the birth and, let's say, the miracle of Christ and all of that.
I'm not very good with time. The way that I've been taught and the way that I learn is straight through transmission, mostly from Hermes. And he says, well, do you remember when? And he'll show me scenes of when. And so I've been studying my past life cultures mostly, and I haven't really delved into other cultures like you guys have. So good on you. But
Much
yeah,
more of a rabbit
resets.
hole he goes down.
The point, yeah, but the point is resets, right? And I agree.
Right.
I've had visions where I was at Egypt and the whole future looked like a game board to me. It was the weirdest vision ever, but it was real. I was an Egyptian goddess, and I looked like a puzzle piece or, a chess piece or something on this large game board of reincarnation. So I don't see things through a physical scientific eye. I actually see through the eye of providence. So I'm much more of like a Joseph Campbell kind of mythology kind of girl, and that's how I speak best. I really don't speak well in science.
What could you tell us about, I mean, as much as you want to talk about, obviously, in terms of past lives, like, what is your impression of that? Do you think, because I've seen some posts you've said, I don't remember specifically, but like things like simulation theory and maybe certain things you've kind of poo-pooed. And I'm just trying to figure out how your ontology works, given you're into Greek stuff, but you're like not into aliens maybe as much. How do you view?
Is that even a correct statement, Jim? Because you say that. Please clarify.
Oh yeah, I don't know. I mean,
Corinne.
Okay. What concept did I poo-poo? I don't understand that one.
Sometimes I've seen you post things where you're like, Bashar says this and that's not accurate. Or
Correct, yes.
Yeah. So, or simulation theories where people are like the New Age movement and stuff like that, which I'm just kind of trying to get your impression of things from your perspective. So,
it's about that game reset, really, when we go back to it, cultural reset. And we've heard from many people nowadays that we're going through a hard cultural reset. So I think it's really important to talk about this right now. So how do I see my past lives? They came through visions, and it's not remembering. I don't have memory like a regular person. I mean, I do. Like, I can remember what I ate this morning, but time doesn't work the way we've been told it works. And my consciousness, while I'm awake, my consciousness raises in vibration, and I go to the plane where I meet Hermes consciously, and then we have meetings, if you will, and I'm taught through transmission and shown like movies, but I'm experiencing them. So I ask questions all the time. I call myself Wonder Woman mostly because I'm wondering about the universe all the time. And when you're that curious and your heart is that open and into knowing, no matter what the answer might be, then you're going to get the answers. Like, I had sleep paralysis. I know what fear is. I know what hell is. I know what demons are. And so things of the light don't scare me. They attract me greatly. And so I get to learn a lot in short amounts of time. And these things are very hard to explain, to take them down like 20 levels basically and try to put them in the English language. But anyone who can meditate, like clear the mind, and then invite God, love, universe into that circle with you, then you're going to get some kind of communication. You really will. It's happened with everyone I've worked with. So it's attainable. The New Age UFO disclosure movement, in my educated opinion, is a part of a reset. completely, a spiritual reset and a reset due to science and the paradigm of materialism. So Bashar's game, which I have a video on my YouTube, Occult Priestess, which is Bashar, Serious Talk. Bashar claims to be from Sirius. He's a channeled entity by Daryl Anka. And he says that there are parallel Earths going on right now. And if you are in a high vibration, you will be in a utopian world. And if you're in a low vibration, you'll be in a samsaric hell-like world. So everything that happens to you is your fault and your responsibility. And that goes back to Aleister Crowley, you are God, which is atheism.
All right. So what I would say, so in a sense, the statement, you are God, and the way you explain it in terms of, I mean, to me, there is a important differentiation between saying everything is my fault and I'm responsible for everything, because the one perspective would be that, first of all, there is something that I could ultimately do wrong. And also then that the real point is about what is my response and what is my interpretation of whatever I'm receiving. And then to the statement of you are God, I would say, yes, that is very much correct. However, the idea here again for me being, well, if God is omnipotent and omnipresent, of course you must also be God. The reference I like to use is the Achintya Beda Beda Tattva from some variant of Indian philosophy, which simply talks about the simultaneous oneness and difference of God and God's energy, or creator and creation. So that would not really be a statement I would criticize on that level. Well, let's just say there's other things I would, let's say, but kindly do continue or expand your view or reply to whatever I just said.
Thank you, Raffael. There is an inherent knowing in our hearts that there is something bigger than us that loves us more than we can imagine. You, Raffael, had to go back to the Buddhist Hindu text to get you are God in the correct way. Most of these people are going back to Aleister Crowley or Theosophy by Blavatsky, which are social engineering.
Right. Yes. Sorry, continue. Yes.
Exactly, right? And that's what I believe Dark Journalist shows us. The social engineering is in the X series, whether that was his intention or not.
Yes.
And we can look at Theosophy and see that they had somnambulists, which were about 9-year-old little girls that they would put into trance and send into the astral realm to spy on other people. And that is child abuse. That is psychic rape. And I'm coming from the Persephone perspective of maidens. You don't do that to little girls. You know, it's like, it's an abomination to the soul. And for Theosophy to be looked at in a positive light, even knowing that they're socially engineering and that they're doing psychic rape to children, it just shows you they are part of the New World Order. In fact, we wouldn't have the school system we have now without Theosophy and Alice Bailey. So these kinds of New World Order conspiracies are what the New Agers need to be looking at and getting serious about. But if they're still stuck in a paradigm where they believe that voting works, and if they're still stuck in the matrix, basically materialism, the materialistic view, then they're not ready for any of this knowledge. And that's pearls before swine.
Yeah, so allow me to say, as far as I understand, and I didn't completely grok this because at first glance, things, even text from H.P. Blavatsky and so on, obviously they're occult texts or Crowley and so on. And I wouldn't, also because I don't know them in detail, wouldn't necessarily certainly not wholesale endorse them, but also not wholesale discount them. However, as I understand, they were also potentially written in a way as to not be the most accessible, let's say. There are various, strange things and assumptions and potentialities with especially those kind of types. And also I understand that apparently Steiner was actually splitting off with anthroposophy because he took issue with certain of their practices. And if I'm not completely mixing this up, weren't they also pretty tight with the whole Jiddu Krishnamurti story?
Oh, Krishnamurti. Thank you for bringing up Krishnamurti. So for those who don't know, Krishnamurti was basically kidnapped, in my opinion, by Theosophy at 14 years old and falsely elevated to be their world guru, their savior, their Maitreya.
But one of the kind of reference points I had slightly before that, funnily enough, through the Zeitgeist movies, were these short excerpts in the beginning, at the end by Krishnamurti, where for the almost first time in my life, I was like, oh, it seems like someone here is talking about philosophy, spirituality. I wasn't yet that far down the deep end, so it was good that he kind of made that connection and, talks in this interesting Indian English authoritative voice. And it's still kind of cryptic now looking back at it, but to me it was an amazing bridge. But maybe you want to continue with the story as to what happened after he got kidnapped, let's say, and trained to be the world savior.
Oh, thank you so much. Krishnamurti is just so blessed, so thank you for all of this conversation about him. So just pop culture, Krishnamurti was the one who inspired Bruce Lee to mix martial arts and come up with something new. So that was freaking awesome. Also love Bruce Lee. He teaches me no fear, like the Buddha, no fear, Bruce Lee. So Krishnamurti eventually figured out what was going on with him. And I'm not an expert at this story, by the way. You might know more than me. And I remember when he went to the United Nations, and this is on YouTube, and he basically reads the Riot Act to the United Nations and says, you guys are all false paradigm. And thank goodness that they did kidnap Krishnamurti. He's a special soul. He was in a horrible place, with horrible people, but he came out of it and he disbanded the order that he was in charge of. He's like, this is going away, no more. And he felt like he was the only authentic teacher around. And just like, I think Carl Jung was pretty authentic too. And these people had to put on a mask to be able to teach the teachings, to reach out to people like you, Raphael.
Indeed, and that just reminds me of, I maintain that truth is a pathless land, as he mentions. And so, yeah, definitely good on him. It's getting trained to be a world savior himself, actually being at least a fractalized aspect of that idea, and therefore realizing that it's not about, individualized savior ideas and, victim, perpetrator, savior games anymore. And so does, in a sense, the only right thing and the only authentic thing, which is to disband this very organization that probably already got bolstered with lots of money, and where he, in a sense, one could say, probably even, who knows how else this could have turned out, but maybe otherwise he would have actually been used as a puppet, just as, many of the current politicians and potentially even gurus actually are. So,
Oh, not potentially gurus. Why do we have two Ammas? Can you answer that question? Is it that they were making so much money off the first Amma, they created a second one?
I didn't even know that, but that's a great story.
I went to see
yes.
Amma, and I found out this was Amma K. I can't say her last name because it's complicated. I'm sorry, I'm a Western idiot, Kumari or something. But Amma, and then there's Amma the hugging guru. But when I first saw the other Amma, I was like, why didn't she hug me? It's like, that's not the same Amma. So I thought when I met the second Amma, the famous Amma, the big Amma, you have to be handled when you meet her. Like, right. It's really crazy, right? Like they manhandle you, and it's kind of like being held by cops. It's not being held by love, and they kind of throw you in her lap, and then she whispers in your ear. And for me, a portal opened up and I saw the universe, which was awesome.
That's pretty dope.
It was dope. And thanks, Amma. I know that pathway. I go there all the time. But the reason why I was attracted to Amma was because of Russell Brand.
This is Amma the hugger, right?
Yeah, hugging Amma. Yeah, that's the second one I did in LA. I met her in LA with all the other brainwashed people out here. But then Russell Brand and Amma were together for quite a few years. And he's a whole other topic, but that's, another false prophet situation. But Russell Brand brought up Krishnamurti and said Krishnamurti was an idiot near the end of his life.
What?
Like, yes, I'm telling you, they're all in it together, dude. So, this is Corinne Wilson, Occult Priestess, reporting from Wonderlust. And we were just with Russell Brand, and he was doing a lecture about the 12 steps. And this is Wonderlust.
Referring to especially in terms of a late part of his life?
That he was referring to him going to the United Nations and giving that speech and saying that he lost his mind in the end.
At his deathbed, or maybe in also some of his talks, let's say close to the end of his life. And apparently at his deathbed, he was sense that he said, well, I did all of this and tried to awaken individuals. And then he said yeah, but now I've been doing this for so long and people just keep following me around, listening to my words. But, if they would have gotten it by now, they wouldn't be following me around like this anymore and just apply the things I'm talking about instead of, traveling along, right? So that this kind of frustrated him.
We could also look at Tesla, that poor bastard Tesla. So people who do good in this world are treated like crap, and we must come to that understanding.
So why do you think that is? I mean, beyond maybe loving pigeons too much or something.
This is samsara. We must try. We are in spiritual warfare here on planet Earth in the third dimension. And that's just the way it's been since the Buddha said it was that way. And before that, the Hindu said it was that way. And even the Egyptians have explanations of why there's darkness in this lifetime on this planet, in these lifetimes, because it is to grow the soul from lead to gold. And that's what Krishnamurti wanted to do. And that's what Yogananda wanted to do too. All of these great gurus had the right intention, but the people around them were horrifying. And just like me at the occult shop, I was surrounded by a lot of muggles, people that were materialists, who had materialist views of life, who were householders. They necessarily just wanted, the picket fence, the house, and the kids. And that's super awesome for them. But they shouldn't be dabbling in any kind of deeper spirituality if that's their life path, in my opinion.
Some karma's gonna get you, gonna knock you off your feet.